I imagine there's other organizations like us that are using it for our infrastructure.
Yeah, and we certainly, I mean, like we certainly do, right? Like we use
Well,
Clubhouse.
that's good.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Cybrary Podcast.
Well, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome.
Welcome back.
Well, welcome back.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Ryan Corey, CEO and co-founder of Cybrary, and I'm excited for you to join us on today's episode. Let's jump in.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Cybrary Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Gruen, VP of Engineering and CISO here at Cybrary. And today we're joined by Zach from Clubhouse IO. I'll let Zach introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, I'm Zach, VP of Engineering at Clubhouse. We make project management software for software development teams. And excited to be here talking to you today, Mike, about how we do security and compliance at Clubhouse.
Cool. Yep. And full disclaimer, we use Clubhouse. We've been using them for years. Really like the product. We use it for all of our product and software engineering management, including our infrastructure and operations. So totally in a DevSecOps use case. Why don't we get started a little bit? Like, can you just tell us a little bit more about your product and
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So Clubhouse is project management software. If you've ever used a product like Asana, Trello, Jira, GitHub Issues, things like that. So issue tracking, but we try and be simple enough that any team from 1 to 10 people can start using it immediately with no previous project management experience, and we scale up to thousands of users. And we provide all of the tools that you need in there to absorb all of that complexity. So if you want to organize your work into a Kanban board and just work on that with your team of 10, that works awesome. And as you grow and you need epics and milestones and ways to visualize how an engineering org with tens and hundreds of people is delivering work, we have reporting and advanced views and ways of organizing your work to help you do that.
Yep, and we found it to be great. We actually use it in a continuous delivery model, so no sprints, it's not agile, and it works very well. One of the things we like about it is, or one of the reasons I chose it in the first place was, it has everything we need, but in it's not super highly complex, configurable like a lot of the other products on the market where you spend the amount of time to get it up and running the way you want it to and then the idea of changing it is like, it's just a big big mountain to climb. So I think it's like meets that perfect like storm of just what you need, not really a whole lot more, not a whole lot less. And we've been using it for years, as I said. So I'm super happy with
that. And I'm sure Mike, if you're a VP of engineering at any small company, you wear a lot of hats, right? So
VP of engineering and CISO. So I think you can.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm VP of engineering, I'm CISO. I actually used to run product for Clubhouse. Also, I'm our IT admin. By night I read contracts, for finance, right? Like, so you do kind of everything, right?
Yep, I feel like I'm talking to myself.
Right.
Yeah, I do. I'm waiting for somebody to knock on the door to ask me to help them plug in their laptop.
Right. Exactly. And, so like, I think that's part of the thing is like, as a VP of engineering at a small company, and not even maybe that small, right? 100 plus people, like you've got a lot of hats to wear and a lot of jobs to do, and keeping track of all of those things and, making sure that, if you're trying to be, for, your CISO, like you're trying to maintain a compliance or security posture, right? Like that's a tough job to manage with everything else you've got going on, with hiring and, trying to ship and deliver things on time. And so, it's a lot of work it's a lot of work to keep track of and to manage to make sure you're hitting important dates. So definitely something that I like, keeps me up at night is trying to make sure that all the plates keep spinning. And so any tools I can get to help me out with that are awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually curious. I mean, so you guys obviously do software development and you have a software development tool. How do you guys sort of use it? Do you guys do agile, or what's sort of your methodology, and how does your product sort of support that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live at Clubhouse, we live a very meta life most of the time because we talk a lot about, oh, how do teams deliver projects in order to figure out how we deliver projects, right? And so we have to use capital letters become very important in our documentation. When we talk about, a project, is that like a project that we're working on? Is it like a project in the Clubhouse nomenclature of project?
Yeah, I
So
couldn't even imagine. Like, I would think that we would just switch over to some sort of like keywords of like, okay, if we talk about hydrogen, we mean.
right, right, totally, totally. We haven't gotten quite that far yet. We've just gone to uppercase and lowercase letters. That's what we've decided on as our kind of thing there. But in terms of what we do at Clubhouse, we run our teams, I think, similar to a lot of startups, right? We do sort of like an agile-ish kind of process. So we try and plan out a roadmap for a quarter, do some degree of capacity planning around like, okay, how many engineers do we have around? Who's taking vacation? Who's going on leave for some reason or another, right? Things like that to get a sense of big picture, kind of like what boulders and rocks and pieces of dust are we going to try and commit to this quarter. Throw some dates on those that we're shooting for. And then, we try and be, agile in the sense of like, we don't want to, we want to do sufficient planning for the boulders that we're putting together to make sure that like, we have confidence around the delivery date, and then we slip in sort of like the smaller, the stones and the dust in between the cracks of that, right? But try not to plan too much up front, but for the big projects that we want to deliver and big features, whether it's something like, our roadmap view for users, or a big change to how our VCS system works out. We want to do the legwork in advance to make sure that we're making the right investments for customers there.
Cool. And so you have, it's interesting, right? Because you guys are in this unique place, I think, where you get to be like where the developers really are their own, like they can really put themselves in that seat. I think that's cool. It's one of those things I've always looked for in a job. It's one of the things that attracted me a little bit to Cybrary is as a cybersecurity person and being able to really empathize and see myself as a cybersecurity professional and how I would want to use the product. So it makes it so much easier for me to really take a lot of ownership for the product that we have. And I think it must be very enjoyable to work at a place like that.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it's definitely great. Like I think it's one of the things that really attracts a lot of people to Clubhouse. We have candidates who are, when we're doing hiring, I got an email from someone the other day that said, anyone trying to kill Jira is a friend of mine.
Yeah, don't even get me started on Atlassian and their whole suite, because I'm not a big fan. So
yeah, totally. So you definitely get like a lot of people who buy into the mission and who want to really like help out and make things great for other developers. Like me personally, for example, right? Like, I started out my career really and cut my teeth at a company called JW Player, which makes an open source web video player and platform. But it was all like, I just fell in love with the idea of like building developer tools, right? And I'm not going to cure cancer. I'm not going to put someone on the moon. Like those are not the skills that I have, but helping other engineers like be more effective and enjoy their job more and help deliver more value to the companies that they're working for. Like that's kind of where I can put a dent in the universe. And I think there's a lot of like-minded people at Clubhouse. The other side of that though is people also just don't let things slide by, right? People get into very passionate debates about like how this should work, how this should look, what the features we're building. And so, we always have to temper on the other side of that.
Yeah, and one of the things I like, I mean, we can get into sort of design philosophies and stuff, but like in one of the things that, because I was also at some point in the product role as well. And I remember there were a lot, like one of the easiest things to say is like, oh, let's just make it configurable. Let's leave it up to the user. The user will decide. And that's where I think things really start to fall apart, because you don't realize like every one of those decisions, everything that you allow a user to make configurable is actually needs to be for a really good reason, and not just because we don't want to take the time to figure out the way this really should work or have an opinion. And while sometimes it feels like maybe you're being a little closed in when you're using software like that that doesn't have all of the configurability, it's exactly some of the things that I like about the software that I like is that, sure, it is the way it is. I can't configure this, but at the same time, it's like one less decision for me to make. And I think you guys have struck a really good chord with or walk that line very well with what's configurable and what's not, as opposed to a lot of the other platforms. So kudos to you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks. No, and I think that that's certainly a big part of it, right? I think, you know, you want your users to walk in and feel like the product they're using is magic, right? And I think if when you give users too many options, or you allow for, there's probably a term for this, right? But like sort of like edge case driven like product development,
Mm-hmm.
where like you think about everything someone might want to do with it and you're optimizing for the last 5 or 10%, you actually kind of miss the big picture of like, okay, but I want 90% of my users to feel the magic of this just working exactly how they want. Now,
Right.
that doesn't mean that you want to leave that other 5 or 10% of your users behind, but it does mean that like you might want to think about like better, more creative solutions to like progressively expose that complexity to them, rather than giving it to them all right up front. And we work really hard on that to make sure that we're, to really keep focus on like, okay, let's really solve the 90% case the best way that we can, and if we need to solve that 5 or 10% at the end, like let's make sure we do that.
Yeah, I mean, right. Avoid that decision fatigue up front. Do as much as you can. It makes a lot of sense. And I think, and we can talk about this all day, but
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure to talk about some of the other things. And like, I'm curious, I know how we're using it. I'm curious how other organizations are using Clubhouse, and, to sort of support their various initiatives. I think it's really easy to think about this type of a tool just being used in your typical application development, similar to how Jira or other things are, being used, where, and I'm just curious, maybe some of the stories of places that are using Clubhouse maybe a little differently, or in different use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think we think about things breaking down kind of as the organization scales. And I generally call it like the rule of threes, right? So like an organization kind of hits a scaling point at every factor of three. So like you have an org that's 3 people, one that's like 9 or 10 people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then like about 30, 100, 300, 300 or 500, let's say, and then, 1,000, 1,500, something like that. And you see each of those orgs using things very differently, right? A 3-person team, like, they're using it basically just like a to-do list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, realistically, a lot of that communication is just, these days, probably going through Slack, or, maybe they're using Microsoft Teams, or even iMessage or something to do a lot of their communication. And, things are just like flowing through that way, right? As you get into bigger, right, and they're probably like working off a single like Kanban board, right, or and they're just tossing stories in and burning through them, and that's awesome, right? And we really see it like, there's a multitude of tools that like do the same thing for just like chuck a bunch of tickets in and work through them. Where we think we really start to add value is when your team gets up to that like 10, 25, 50, 100 scale, and you sort of go from like a tight knit group that's all, in olden times would have been like sitting around a table together, or like in a room together.
Mm-hmm.
And now suddenly, like you've, space constraints, physical constraints, like people start to move out, right? And so at that point, you get a little more rigorous, and people start breaking things up into iterations, right? Like they're thinking about, okay, like what do I like? Not what am I delivering today, but what are we going to plan together to do, so that you reduce that communication burden. You can say, okay, like we're going to have one planning meeting at the beginning of the week, and then everyone's going to burn through, and we can check in for 5 or 10 minutes in a stand up, every day. And then, either, we ship at the end of this 2 weeks, or, we flip on a feature flag, and we track the results, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the one team, we'll call that like the one team development. Once you get into 2-team development, you see people looking at bigger things, and we see them really start to put like above 10. We start seeing people like really push into using like epics, right? And so now they're moving into, okay, I've got my team has a designer and a project manager or a product manager who's going out and doing the research up ahead. They're going to go work on all of this, right? And come back and report back to us. And so we're going to plan out this epic, this specific project. And we may have 2 or 3 of these projects in flight, because now we've got dedicated resources working on the planning, even in advance of engineering digging in and doing kind of like implementation. So they start to put work into epics. And then, again, that team is still going to sit down and plan out their iteration, but, everyone on the team may be moving in a bit of a different direction at that point, right? And, you may in fact have multiple teams doing that, and you have a manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other big change that happens, is suddenly like you start getting like some degree of professional management in the organization, and they want to see like, okay, let me compare what's going on between these two teams, and reporting starts to emerge as like an important consideration for them, right? How long do these things take for each team relatively, and like how reliable is delivery across these? What's their relative velocity? Where are their capacity and process bottlenecks, right? Those are the kinds of questions you start seeing crop up.
Yep. And or like one of the ones I like to focus on is like the amount of new work we're doing versus rework, whether it's bug fixes or maybe we didn't quite get this feature right. And then this way we can sort of see, like, I don't mind, like, it's fine to do rework. Like, we're an iterative shop. It's totally fine. We definitely believe in this, like, get the feature out, iterate to success. But we also want to make sure that we're spending not all of our time just iterating on things we've already done, but we're also working on new features as well. So seeing what that balance is an important thing.
Yeah, and your process becomes much more important, right? Like, you want to know, like, did I complete my sprint? Like, right, did I complete my iteration or my sprint? Or are there stories carrying over? Like, how often am I completing it? How often am I bringing in new work? How good are my estimates, right? You start to get into much more of a, an operational sort of like mentality about how you do things.
Right. And I think as the organization grows, I mean, we prioritize or optimize for, I should say, we optimize for speed over predictability, which means we don't spend a lot of time up front trying to figure out those boulders and what we're going to get done this quarter and yada, yada, yada. There's not a lot of dates. We don't do a lot of dates. We have optimized for, let's just dig in, get the work done and move it out, iterate to success, move on, which is a totally, your platform supports that. Your platform also supports the more traditional, or I guess it's traditional at this point because Agile's been around. They talk about it as if it's new, but it's been around for like 20 years. But the more sort of iterative, spend some time figuring out what you're going to do, and then you're optimizing more for predictability because you have a large sales or marketing operation that needs to be really well connected and needs to plan things out because they have their own iterations that they're working on that need to, so that when you're doing a major product release, everything is all lined up and ready to go out the door. So I think, as you said, as organizations grow, the needs change for where you want to be spending your time and how you want to be spending your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, so, I mean, I think that's all pretty well within the traditional sort of engineering. How are you guys seeing, like from an operations team like that being picked up and using Clubhouse in a slightly, sort of in the infrastructure as code? There's no reason, we use Clubhouse for everything. So I imagine there's other organizations like us that are using it for our infrastructure and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we certainly, I mean, like, we certainly do, right? Like, we use
Well,
Clubhouse.
that's good.
Yeah. I mean, we for better or worse, we force. I mean, force is the wrong word. Maybe I should restate that. We there's no coercion that happens, but we certainly strongly encourage everyone on all teams at Clubhouse to use Clubhouse. So that means marketing, sales, finance, ops.
I think it's called drinking your own champagne or eating your own dog food. It really depends on whether or not you're forcing them or celebrating it. But yeah,
totally. So like definitely our ops team use it, and like certainly like me as CISO, like like I said before, like I depend on it. But like we've got these integrations with things like like with GitHub, like, and GitLab and all of these VCS providers. So certainly our ops team, like as they create stories, like tickets get connected up with the work that they're doing. We've got a robust API, right? Like, so if you want to integrate it with in some way, like with Terraform, as things move through, or AWS, like as things move through deployment, or your CI system, right? Like as things move through deployment pipelines, right? Certainly, like we see people doing that, right? Where as things either infrastructure or just like straight up deployments, right? People hook up and say, okay, this is now sitting in this environment, right? This configuration change has been applied here. And Clubhouse is really fundamentally at the end of the day a workflow tool, right? And so we see people implementing all sorts of workflows and tying that into their their systems, like as appropriate, kind of regardless of what team they're working on. So
yeah, I mean, even like we have a small HR people, they're called people. Our people team actually has a little small Clubhouse project as well. It's a totally different workspace where they can, we don't want everybody to see because it's a totally separate type of project and
Yeah, of
everything else.
course.
But yeah, they were able to, they're able to use it for just general workflow stuff as well. So it's pretty cool to see it sort of in a totally different sort of use case.
Yeah, and one of the limitations that it's interesting as the world moves more into this sort of API driven small tech companies are kind of running everything, right? We see people hooking up, like to your point, like their HR workflows or their Figma workflows, right? If they're in design or at Atlantis if they're using Terraform, right? Hooking up these things via Clubhouse's API. And so, as you go from or to Greenhouse, right? If you're doing like applicant tracking and things like that. So yes, Greenhouse has its own workflow system, but like our HR system, oftentimes HR people we see like oftentimes hooking these things up and saying, okay, like let's move this candidate through Clubhouse because once they get here, we need to do more with them, right? Like we need to continue that journey outside of where they land in the applicant tracking system.
Yeah, for us, it's right. Our ATS is we recently switched to Greenhouse. But yeah, it's sort of similar for onboarding or for other projects, or there's lots of reasons why we might use just a regular project management tool or again, it's a workflow. So that's pretty cool.
And like as CISO, like as the person at Clubhouse who's responsible for compliance, like we do, like this is exactly what we use it for, right? Like anytime someone starts at Clubhouse, like we have a story template, right, with all of the onboarding tasks. We go, it's got various owners within the organization, right? So it doesn't all have to come to me, right? Like someone comes on, the story gets created, and all of this work actually kind of gets distributed across the org. So that's the other thing about the product that's so important, is making sure that you're involving everyone across the org who's got the best responsibility, rather than just always devolving to putting all of the work on your CISO to do everything.
Right.
Similarly for offboarding and things like that. So
cool. So yeah, no, it's always interesting to talk to a company that's using their own product in it, right? Because they want to use it for various reasons, and then they get to use it in these interesting ways and solve different problems. Any other sort of in terms of from, especially I think from Cybrary's perspective, because we do a lot with security people, and DevSecOps is very a hot topic right now. Someone to argue whether or not it's a buzzword, but I'm just curious, like any other things in that realm or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like big thing for us is like around sort of like our SOC 2 process, right? Like that to us is certainly like a big thing. It's coming, we have our audit coming up pretty soon. We're about to like go down that path. And so, as we think about like what pillars are we going to do? And so like a big discussion for us recently has been around like our disaster recovery, right? Like, are we going to offer availability as a pillar? And trying to figure out with disaster recovery, like, okay, like when did we last do a disaster recovery exercise? Like, what do we need to do for a disaster recovery exercise, right? And so for all of these processes like that, what we've done and what we encourage people to do is like, you want to write down the process, right? Make sure that you've got that documented. And in Clubhouse, the nice thing is you can just go, what we do is like, we just go to the last time that we ran it, right? And we just copy everything a second. We take the epic that's got all of the work that we did, and we click copy, right? And we just change a bunch of dates, right? And suddenly like we're ready to go again. So it really helps you create this, the tool really helps you create this repeatable process for any of these operational things that you need to do that may not otherwise have, like full automation, like may not be fully automatable, right? That require actual human intervention into the process.
God forbid, because but yes, you can't avoid it. But yes, we try and do everything as automated as possible. But yeah, there's certain things you just can't do. So it's great to have tools to help you sort of manage and sort of automate to the best of ability of like assigning tasks and then making sure that you can even trigger off of people saying, oh well, I did finish that task, and then the next trigger goes. So it's very cool.
Yeah, so we're super excited about that.
Awesome. Anything big coming out for in the near future?
Yeah, I mean,
you want to share?
Oh no. There's lots of good stuff coming up that we can share. We try and be transparent. Like transparency is an important value to us as an organization. So I won't tell you about our secret, like, time manipulation machine. That one I can't talk to you about the details of, but we've got some really cool new features coming up around planning in particular. So like we've got a roadmap feature that we launched recently, and right now it'll show you epics in a timeline type of view, and that's going to get milestones added in addition to it. So that's super exciting, and that's coming up in the next few weeks. We're also like going deeper on our integration framework, so like or our integrations that we have. So expect more Slack notifications around things, and we're trying to help people organize a little bit differently. People, oftentimes now break up into teams, groups of people. And we've released some work around that. We're going to start building out more notifications and more views that are based on the team that you're part of, so you can keep up to date. And as someone who's again dogfooding this feature already, it's just provided me with like unbelievable visibility because it just groups things so logically for how I think most teams are working. So that's been that's a big enhancement that's coming along the way that I think most people will like, especially if you're a Slack junkie like me.
Yep, definitely looking forward to that stuff. I think speaking of Slack, one of the things, it's very similar to Cybrary as well. You guys have a Slack community where users can join and talk to various people. Have you found that? Like, obviously you guys have continued to do that. I'm just curious what your experience has been with that Slack community.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So like, we've gotten a lot of value out of our Slack community, right? I mean, so maybe by way of comparison, when I first started working at JW Player, and this was probably like over 10 years ago, we had like our big thing was we had a web forum, right? Where people could go and post things. And it was like a big part of my day to go and respond to people on this web forum. And it was good. I mean, look, it was great as a junior developer. I met a lot of like really interesting people that way. I made a friend in Peru. I met some interesting people in the Netherlands. Like, it was really cool. But the amazing thing about the Slack community is it's kind of like that. But it's in Slack. I get notifications around it, and we get great things like feedback on the product. It's one of our best bug reporting channels. Like, we get really live feedback, and the amazing thing to see is kind of like that web forum, is that like I don't have to do all of the work, and even like not everyone at Clubhouse has to do the work. There are people in there who are just passionate about project management and Clubhouse, and who want to help each other. So people ask, oh, how do I set up? I'm trying to do this thing, like how should I configure my projects in Clubhouse or my epics in Clubhouse to do this? And it's really cool to see that, right? To see people outside of Clubhouse who feel passionate about the product, sharing their knowledge and working with others and helping them out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's as a member of that community, I've definitely seen that. I'm also really impressed with, I've been working with you guys for a while, and sort of we have rolled out Zendesk here. I know that's a tool that you guys use, and you guys giving us information, sort of how do you use it, and really helping us to integrate it well with Clubhouse. That's all stuff that's really been helpful to us as well. So I think that sort of user community, you guys really get it, like, and really embrace that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I love the members of our community, right? I think they're awesome. I also, got to tell you, like, hat tip to the people on our team. Also, we do it basically people do it voluntarily. Like, we're not, it's not anyone's official job title to run our Slack community. And we get engineers in there, responding to people's tweets on Twitter. And it's just such a far cry in terms of, I think, user experience. The difference between like a company like Google or Facebook, where if you happen to have a friend who works there, like maybe you can get a hint at something, and versus like our Slack community, I'm always just blown away about how our engineers and product people and design people are just jumping in and interacting and just available to the community. So I'm really proud of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, definitely something for us to shoot for as well. Cool. So I thank you for joining us. I'm curious, any final thoughts or anything you want to, mention before we go?
No, just the fact that really, I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit, Mike, and very certainly very excited about working together in the future. And I guess I should have said at the beginning, like, we use Cybrary we use Cybrary also, right? So really excited about this, how we get to use each other's products, and hope you'll continue to send feedback our way, and keep up the great work.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and definitely.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.